well, I'm trying to find the Quran here. The interesting thing, it's not easy access. I thought I would have easy access. Anyway, the Quran says the end of the world only God knows. And they ask you the end of the world, say only قُلْ إِنَّ عِلْمَهَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ, say its knowledge belongs to God. And other verse says it will come you on suddenly, will come to you baghtatan, means suddenly. And therefore, throughout history, Muslims thought that the end of the world would not be known by anyone else. But the Quran gives some signs about the end of the world. There are several signs. One sign is اخترب الساعة وشق القمر. The end of the world came close and the moon split. There are two understandings. One, split in health. The other, just something split means like when the rain comes, when the earth a little bit split, it is also the word shaqqa is used for that in the Quran. Therefore, it could be just little split or taking the soil from the moon. It could be considered as fulfillment of this. And my understanding is this may be reference to the 1969 landing on the moon and taking some rocks and some piece from that. It is basically fulfill the meaning of this verse. And this is one of the signs. The other sign is dukhan. Smoke will show up and it will be very scary. People will be scared, and later it will be restored. The situation will be fine. We don't know. I don't know whether it is shown, but maybe in the future, and it could be a volcano eruption, or it could be human-made, all global warming, whatever it is. Yeah, it could be anything. And the other is dabbeh, that from earth which will come and will talk about God's sign, and that people do not believe the sign. And my understanding is this dabbeh min al-ard, not min al-ma. This kind of spatial kind of dabbeh, which is and which is silicone, and the computer is made of such a thing. And that computer with its own language is telling us by witnessing.
What's the word dabba mean? Dabba.
Dabba means something moving, active thing. That, well, computer is a rotating part, electricity through it. Dabba means creature, basically.
So it fits in
yeah, it could be. If it is dabba min al-ard, means a kind of robot, means made of earth, I mean, not flesh, not blood.
God says that He made all living things of water.
Yeah, all living things, min al-ma. But this one is min al-ard. Min al-ard has two meanings. Either place us as a place, as a source of origin from earth, or made of earth.
Which is basically the same thing.
Yeah, made of earth. Anyway, and this is, I do think that it fits to the discovery of 19 through the computer, and it was without computer we wouldn't be able to know first. Therefore, I think that it is, and there are very interesting kind of things about that mathematical coincidence, whatever.
Would you give us this?
It is, I don't have right now in my mind. I need to have these verses to show. The other one, which one was it? The other sign of the end of the world is Zulqarnain is yes, before end of the world that show up, and it is the one with two horns or with 2 centuries. Another sign of the end of the world was, I believe, when humans think that they are أنهم قادرون على كل شيء, they can do anything they want.
Is this Maya?
Yes. And it is technologically means we will come to a certain point. As Michael Sherman said, we can do anything we want and there's no need for God. The arrogance of humanity, and that technology will be able to fix the diseases. Maybe we may think that we can even find cure for death, and we are able to control many things on earth. And therefore, at the zenith of arrogance, where you are, the end of the world comes, when the solar system explodes and everything gone. What control you can have? We are not controlling the laws in the nature or the galaxies. And but knowing the end of the world obviously seems impossible. However, since God says, قُلْ إِنَّمَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ عِلْمُ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ. Say, its knowledge belongs to God. But nowhere God says God will not give this knowledge. Therefore, there's another verse in the Quran uses exactly the same language. Ajrun Azim, the great recompense, reward belongs to God. The same statement. But in other verses, God says God give to whomever He chooses. Therefore, belonging to God does not necessarily mean God will not give, but without God's permission, that means you cannot get. Therefore, there are verses in chapter 72, Jinn, talking about that the knowledge of future belongs to God, but He can give some to the messenger that He chooses. And that's fascinating verses because it is really in the context of mathematics and counting. وَأَحْصَى كُلَّ شَيْءٍ عَدَدًا. He counted everything in numbers just before those verses, chapter 72, full of references to prophetic events.
Does the God also say in the Quran that He almost hid it?
Oh yeah, I'm coming to that. And there's a verse in the Quran, إِنَّ السَّاعَةَ آتِيَةٌ أَكَادُ أُخْفِيهَا. And the end of the world is coming. أَكَادُ أُخْفِيهَا, almost I am hiding it. But translation had problem with that because the traditional understanding is God will not reveal it. But this verse, through that language, means God may reveal it.
Almost.
Yeah, almost hide it means I will reveal it. Since this contradicted that and they had mistranslated this, is one of the, in my Turkish book, Errors in Turkish Translation is one of them. And I look at the translations, they are just all over. Since they have a big problem, they translate contradictory way, and some of them says I will reveal it, or I decided to hide it. Ekadu, instead of almost, they say I decided to hide it. Anyway, and that verse is interesting, and the verse I think is 15 in one of the chapters, verse number 15. And then in chapter 15, and we see God says, let me find that verse, chapter 15, whether we'll be able to find. In chapter 15, says, وَلَا تَمُدَّنَّ عَيْنَيْكَ إِلَى مَا أُوتِيَ. That verse says, do not look kind of in a admiration or with jealousy to something we had given to the previous ones. And then وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَاكَ سَبْعًا مِنَ الْمَثَانِ وَالْقُرْآنَ الْعَظِيمِ. We had given you the repeated 7 and the great book. And that's interesting, very curious, because it talks about the kind of the previous ummah, and then here it is, we have given you the two repeated or
two pairs.
double, pairs, 7 pairs. It is interesting, and they said that the traditional understanding, they have problem with this. They have various ideas, but the most common one is 7 Mesani is Fatiha, because there are 7 verses. It is repeated in prayers, therefore we gave you Fatiha and the Great Quran. It is okay, it seems kind of fine, but then we have a problem. If Fatiha is not part of the Great Quran, there's a problem. It doesn't even say Quran, the Great Quran. Therefore, Fatiha must be part of the Quran,
Absolutely.
let alone Great Quran. And therefore, we cannot really say Fatiha is not part of the Quran. If it was Quran, we had given you Quran and Sabah min al-Misani, perhaps that interpretation would be acceptable, because you first say the whole, and then you talk about the part for emphasis purposes. But when you mention small and then big, then that small doesn't become part of it. Yeah, it is logically seems problematic. But with the context, when you look at it, it seems kind of something related to the time, to the other nations, and Muhammad will get longer. And what is Saban min al-Masani, what it could be, when Rashad wrote an article about that, and he published it as a pamphlet. That time I was in Turkey, I didn't have that pamphlet. And only I learned from a Tunisian Arabic magazine. That time, I don't know how I came across. And in that magazine, it was publishing Rashad's Discovery of 19, summary of it, and then says next issue, Rashad is revealing the end of the world from the Quran. I got very curious about that, and I got over my Sunni traditional, but that time I think I was Quran alone.
Really?
Yeah. But, and then I checked the Quran, and what could it be, and I came this verse.
Yourself?
Yeah, independent of Rashad. And then I said, this is Saba min al-Masani. Most likely it is 14 initials, that they are separate initials. They are not repeated. And then I said, let me look at the geometrical value of them. I found the geometrical value of them to be 1709. Therefore, 1710 will be the end of the world, I said. And I wrote Rashad a letter. I said, I don't know what is your date, and here is mine I got from the Quran. And he congratulated me, says, great.
How did he discover?
I don't know. He discovered in 1980. Very interesting. He discovered in 1980, and exactly from the same way. From the same...
Saba Mathani and
Saba
then numerical values.
Okay. And then numerical values. But he had some more support. His support was, one of them was very interesting. This is 1710, and the equivalent of it in terms of this is most common Miladi Gregorian calendar is 2280. And both dates are multiple of 19, not only multiple of 19, both dates are multiple of 570, which is a big number to be. One is 3 times 570, the other is 4 times 570. And 570 is the year that Muhammad was born according to most common calendar. That's very interesting, that Hijri and Miladi somehow comes the same. And it's really related to exactly Hijri starting when Muhammad was 63 years old, not 60, 53 years old. That 53-year difference is the one, in these many years it makes...
63.
No, because Hijrat was in 53 when he was 53 some years old.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah, about 10 years later he passed away. Therefore, that difference is the one exactly make it these two come equal as multiple of 570. And but also he found that he discovered in 1980 and 1709, which is will be 300, just 1 year before the end of the world, will be 309, and 309 years. You know, he discovered in 1980. 1980 was 1400. 1400, and then
Hijri.
Yeah, Hijri 1400. Therefore, for 300 plus 309, it will be 1709, equal to the.
You mean 300 and plus 9?
300 plus.
People of the cave.
Yes, he had 1980, from 1980 to 2280, there are exactly 300 years. From 1980 to 1710 as a Hijri, there are exactly 309 years. And then from that he related to the number of Ashab al-Kahf remaining there. Very interesting, the story of Ashab al-Kahf, the people of the cave, is related to the end of the world. Because the Quran, when mentions about Ashab al-Raqim, the people of number, and says these are signs about the end of the world.
Wow.